What is up, YouTube? MCool40 here. We are with
Thomas Tyson.
And what did you play today?
Today I played Touken Ranbu.
How did you go 6-1?
I went 5-2 on the day, all in all.
Close enough.
Did not go 6-1. All in all, I realistically think a lot of it is people not knowing what the deck does, and realistically, the deck's far more powerful than most people give credit, because nobody wants to really give it a chance. It was kind of released, like it was announced as an April Fool's Day gag, and then they actually made it a thing, and it's kind of just been what I've wanted to play. Shisho's literally the card that made me pick this game up again.
Alright, let's do this.
Alright, so for our starter we play Seiyo Samanji Toku. It's Forerunner, obviously. It's an activated ability whenever you have GB1. Counterblast 1, put it into your soul. If you have 5 damage in your damage zone, choose one of your units and it gets plus 5k and plus 1 crit until end of turn. Now the big thing to note with this is that it doesn't specifically go to the Vanguard. So I'll go over it a little later, but you have a restanding Vanguard and you can set up crit 2 lanes that are just really big and attack twice with that.
Alright.
So for our trigger lineup, we have 2 Imanatsurugi Toku. It's a draw trigger, put it into the soul, counter charge. A lot of lists play 4. I don't like going that deep on it because the deck does realistically have a problem with decking out sometimes with how much you go through it. And having cards that you just generate a lot of card advantage and can keep your hand size pretty well. When I played Link Joker earlier in the day, I had like 14 cards in hand against him. He's like, what does this deck even do? After that, I played 2 stand triggers. Now, this stand trigger in particular, I've been playing since the clan came out. It has an auto ability once per turn. Whenever your Vanguard attacks, if this unit's in your back row, stand this unit. Then, if you have a grade 4 or greater Vanguard with the Homari ability, choose one of your rear guards in the same column as this unit and stand it. So basically, it just sets up small combos. Whenever you attack, you can restand it to get bonus value. If you hit the other stand trigger, you can stand the unit in front of it, and then you've got a booster behind it. So it can just create some value. And again, when we get to the Stride deck and some of the other cards, I'll go over some of the synergies that come back to Aizen. Outside of that, we play 8 crit. Pretty standard.
Buckle up, buckaroo.
4 Shogadai Kiri Mitsutara, which is the double row crit trigger. It has the ability, whenever it goes into the soul, you can choose 2 units in your front row and give them plus 3k and draw a card. So this has to be standing to do it, so you can't use it to boost, which is a small drawback. But there are times where if I just have it in my opening hand, especially if I'm going second, I'll call my grade 1, call my starter in another row, drop this down, attack with my starter, hit for 10k, get my trigger check, and then my starter can hit for 8k on top of it.
Oh god,
or attack with the Vanguard for 10k.
GB.
Yeah, it's not GB related.
Wow.
Right? And it doesn't care what your Vanguard is. You can do it as soon as you're at grade 1 or whenever you're at grade 4. It doesn't care what Vanguard is. After that, we're playing 4 heals. Surprise, I'm sure.
Oh, I know, right?
Alright, so now we go into the grade 1 lineup. Mine is a little heavier than most. I believe I'm playing 15 if I remember getting my count correctly. I'm playing 4 Horikawa Kunihiro Toku. This is probably your single best grade 1. It's got the Nitao Kaigen ability, it's got GB1. Whenever it boosts an Uchigatana when you have GB1, it gets plus 3 for itself, and then if the Uchigatana it's boosting has the Nitao Kaigen ability, it gets another plus 3. So this can potentially be a 13k boost. Outside of that, we're playing 4 GPGs. I feel like that's what you should be playing. The one that came out in set 2 is not really that good. There's a small consideration for playing the one from the trial deck because it's one of the old ones so you can guard for anything, but ultimately at the end of the day I don't feel like it's worth it. So I'm playing 3 Stride Fodder, and the Stride Fodder has a pretty unique ability that's going to bring us back to Aizen briefly. So the Stride Fodder has an activated ability of put this unit into your soul, choose one of your grade 4 or greater Vanguard or units, until end of turn it gets plus 5k and it picks up an auto ability that's a Homari ability. The reason that's relevant for Aizen is because then anything in front of it will stand when your Vanguard swings because it now has a Homari ability for Aizen. Beyond that, it has Soul Blast 1. When your Vanguard hits, you may pay the cost. If you do, countercharge 2. So it helps you keep up with fueling, just helps keep fuel going so you don't run out of counterblast.
Wish they were hollow. Wish they were hollow.
Yeah, right? This is the highest rarity. Next up, we have 3 Honobami Toshiro Tokus.
It's a trap.
Which is another one of our Wakazashis, which helps out our other cards with the Nitao Kaigen ability. This is another card that helps you keep your countercharge going, because as GB1, when you call it to the guard circle, Soul Blast 1, countercharge 1. So if somebody's attacking you for like 13k, you can just be like, sweet, 16k countercharge. Like Soul Blast 1, countercharge. Beyond that, at all times, it has an ability, at the end of your turn, you can counterblast 1 to return it to your hand. So you can use it for early game pressure, counterblast it to get it back to your hand, and then use it to blast out a soul to get that damage back. So it kind of performs a double duty and being able to guard and be aggressive. Next up, we have 2 Mutsunokami Yoshiyuki Tokus. Now, I especially like this card. It's something that I came to play more in my locals because of its ability and some of the combos that it can set up in the deck. It has a continuous ability of Shiken Hisatsu. This unit can attack from the back row. At GB1, you can use Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. When this unit attacks the Vanguard, it gets plus 9k until end of turn. So it's a 16k beater from the back row, and if you go into your restanding Vanguard, like we were or your Vanguard that restands your columns, like we were talking about earlier, you can potentially get off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attacks reliably that turn.
Infinite health.
Yeah, which just gives you a bunch of pressure. Next up is a card that I haven't been seeing many lists play. I think it's because it's got a small body, but this card, like I said earlier, is the reason I started playing this game again. This is Shishi. He has an ability, Shiken Hisatsu, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose a card from your hand, discard it, draw 2 cards. He also has not resist. He's got a continuous ability while he's on the rearguard circle. This unit cannot be chosen by the effects of your opponent's cards. But I play him as a 4-of. I don't see him in any lists. I'm assuming it's because he's a small body. He's 7k, he's not the best to ride, and he's hard to hit in some of your side columns. But at the end of the day, again, going back to playing the Aizen stand, the Homari ability, you can get multiple activations out of his ability because it's when he attacks, not when he hits.
Pretty good. This deck is so aggressive, I like it.
Next up is probably the card that I overlooked from set 2 because I didn't like that I had to take a card from my hand and jam it into my soul. But this is, Izumi no Kami Kanesada Toku. He's got the Nitao Kaigen ability, which is an ability I kind of took it as a joke to begin with, because it's like, it requires specific things, and I realized how many Wakazashis there were, and it got a lot better. He has an auto ability whenever he's put on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle. You can choose a card from your hand, jam it into your soul. So he helps fuel all the Soul Blasts that we've been using in the deck. Then you look at your top 7 cards of the deck and search for a Wakazashi. The ideal hit's Horikawa because it makes a 26k beat lane with him, because when he's being boosted by a Wakazashi, he gets plus 4k. So he can be 20k as soon as you go to grade 2, which is really hard for a lot of decks to deal with, and it allows you to apply a lot of early pressure. Tag that with, we are playing admittedly only 2 stands. You can attack with the 20k row, attack with Vanguard, restand him, and then battle for another 14. So it can apply a lot of pressure to your opponent's damage and hand, depending on if they want to guard it or not. I am only playing 10 grade 2s, so there's only 2 of this fellow. This is Heshikiri Hasabe. I put him back in right before coming to this event because I decided that I don't need more cards with the Nitao Kaigen ability. I don't think any of them but Kanesada are really good enough if we're going to be honest. The other ones are like Soul Blast 1, Countercharge 1 if he's boosted, but like you never want to go into it because you always want to have Kanesada or Shishio. So the reason I like Hasabe is because he has a Homari ability. When his attack hits a Vanguard, you can pay the cost, and the cost is a Counterblast. If you do, you stand him, he gets plus 2k, and then he can attack anything that is not a Vanguard. This includes things in your opponent's back row. So he can literally go, hit your Vanguard, stand, I'm 11k, punch your starter. And a lot of decks like having their starter and will drop a 10k card to save it. So again, just another card that applies a lot of pressure in the early game. Next, we go to the Stride deck. I've talked to a couple people. There are people that like Kogitsu no Maru Toku. I personally do not. I've been playing Surumaru as my main stride for basically the entire time that I've been playing Touken Ranbu. Surumaru Kunonaga basically sets up your entire deck. When he comes down, if you, for whatever reason, had like a G3 go to your damage and then healed out, when you attack and he hits, you can soul charge one to get that back and counter charge one. So now you've got stride fodder for next turn potentially. Beyond that, he's one of the very few cards that has a stride skill that benefits you instead of harming you. His stride skill is Soul Blast 1, choose 2 of your units and they get plus 3k until end of turn. It doesn't care where they are, it just gives them 3k. So something you can do with him when you stride, if you have the Kanasada Horikawa lane, you can make it 32k, and that's more than most decks can G-guard to stop. So it just makes a really obnoxious number for that lane, and the card's just all around super sound. If you go to the late game and you can't stride, you can try to hit. If you hit, you soul charge one, soul blast one, counter charge one, and then get a grade 3 back so you can stride next turn.
I see a card that I was going to question.
Is it our Legion,
Yeah.
Jirutachi Toku, and Taratachi Toku?
Yeah.
So I've been having problems sometimes just because like I like to draw a billion cards, so I will make it a point to draw a billion cards when I can, especially with like Shishio and stuff. I've gotten really close to decking out sometimes. So at first I put this in to prevent that. Both legions seek each other, so it doesn't matter which one hits. From what I've found, actually, this legion's unique in that it has the like legion mate thing on both sides. So I still have to decide what way I want to play it, if I want them sword to sword or back to back. I haven't decided which one looks cooler. But there's actually a setup with these two and Seo Samanji that I found out was a lot scarier than I gave it credit for when I first legioned the only game I actually legioned. So you can use Seo's ability to give this plus 5k and a crit, and its own ability makes it so it restands. So you can attack, use his ability, use Taratachi's ability, counterblast one, choose 2 cards from your hand, jam them to the soul. This is going to get drive -1 and it's going to restand. Jirutachi gets an ability, counterblast 1, soul blast 2. When it attacks, you can give 4 units in your front row 5k. So you give the Legion plus 10, plus your other columns plus 5, or your other front rows plus 5. And now you're attacking for 37 crit 2 with a restanding. I'm not sure if anybody else likes it. I've been playing it, it's done well for me. You can use one to stride early and then get the other one and go into it later. You can also use some other things to make sure that you can get your Legion if you want, which I'll go into when I go into the G deck, because the G deck has a lot of flex and it's where a lot of the power of the deck is. So our 7th grade 3 is Ugisamaru Touken. I put him in as a 3 of it first before deciding to play the Legion, and I've decided that I want to play him because he finds Surumaru himself. Because he finds a Tachi. So I was going through my list the other day. I was like, what all are Tachis? Surumaru's a Tachi, the double rare crit trigger's a Tachi, your perfect guard's a Tachi, and Shishio's a Tachi. So you have 4 of Tachis at all of your grades. Except for grade 1. You don't have a grade 1 Tachi. I lied.
Alright, stride deck.
He also has, while we're on him mentioning stride, he's another unit with a stride skill, Shingen Hisatsu. When you stride, choose up to 3 of your units, they get plus 3k. So he can also help make columns for the deck. So now we're going to go into the stride deck. I made some last minute adjustments to that right before coming out to the event. Originally, I was not playing Sabriz, but I decided a larger tournament that's not my locals, I would really like to have it. Didn't use it at all today, but I've got the option. I play 1 Hotarumaru from the first, from set 1. So I expect to catch a lot of flack for this because I'm playing 1 Hotarumaru and his ability requires you to kick a copy of himself out. But you're not playing him for that, you're playing him because he's the only grade 4 in the clan that naturally has a Homari ability. So if you have your Shishio Aizenro, you can attack, bluff it, and they'll basically perfect guard him if they didn't plan to, just because they're afraid of the ability. So you'll get 2 Shishio activations that turn as well.
That's It's actually really good.
He's the only one that actually has it. Next up, we're going to go into what I generally stride
So is this
first.
typically, well, is this your second stride first option? Depending.
That's one of my first stride options, but it really depends on how the game's shaped up. If I don't have the counterblast, I'll play it to put the to force pressure down, because it doesn't require counterblast, it doesn't require soul blast. It literally just requires hitting, so it puts the decision on your opponent, not you.
That's true. A lot of the problem I've seen with this deck is a lot of it is GB2.
There is a handful of it that's GB2, so we'll talk about Nihongo first and foremost. He's GB2, but he's one of the deck's finishers. He's got CB1, choose a copy of him, kick it out of your G zone whenever he attacks. If you pay the cost, your opponent can't call Sentinels from hand to guard, and he gets plus 3k for every card that you have standing. So often, he's your first attack that turn if you're attacking. There's also been turns where, surprise, with Seo Samanji, I've set up that he is plus 5k and a crit that you can't perfect guard. So there's just a lot of small things that happen with the deck as you play it and you learn your lines of play. Another thing is, since it's an attack trigger, you can also use your crit trigger to get double duty. So you can attack with Nihongo, get plus 3 because this is standing, then since it's an attack trigger, you can put it into the soul to give him another plus 3 from his own ability.
So good.
Like, just small things like that are things I don't expect people to like be ready for. No. Outside of that, we're going to move on to our next stride. This is usually our first stride, realistically. This is Iwatushi. Iwatushi has an activated ability, Counterblast 1, choose a face-down copy of himself, kick him out, and he can attack the entire front row this turn.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, like, generic good first stride, sets up your GB 2, 3, whatever abilities. Another card that I first strode sometimes, depending on the match, this is usually for control decks specifically, is Tsurumaru Kuninaga Toku. He is CB1, SB1, choose a face-down copy of him, kick it out, choose a grade 3 and a grade 2 from your drop zone. So you can kick out the grade 2 from your soul to pick it as well. So like, early on if I wrote a Shishio and I want a Shishio, I can kick out the Shishio and get the Shishio on the field now. Or I can kick out a Kanasada and get the Kanasada. Or I can kick out a Hashikiri and get a Hashikiri. It just basically makes you build a field. It's Touken Ranbu's Dire, so to speak. I see a lot of lists playing it as a 4. I like it at 2. I don't use it that often that I wanted it for. And honestly, it's only really good against like hard control decks, and I just don't think it's super relevant against the hard control decks because you've also got Shishio, which has resist, so that's hard for those decks to deal with as well.
I'm gonna have to speed this up slightly, I'm sorry.
Sorry. We also have Ishikiramaru Toku. He is probably one of my favorite strides. I considered playing a second copy of him over the Hotaru Maru. He is CB1, choose a face-down card from your G-Zone, turn it face up. If all of your units are rested, he gets plus 10k, plus 1 crit, and plus 1 drive as long as there's 3 or more face-up cards in your G-Zone. So if I go first stride Iwatushi, second stride Ishikiramaru, I can just kick up like my Seabreeze or something, and now I've got 3 face-up. So this is 36k base with 2 crit and 4 drive trigger checks. The card is absolutely ridiculous. It's really good at building hands, it's good at applying pressure, and it just lets you play a more Vanguard-centric game against the control decks as well. We play 2 copies of Mikazuki Munichika from G-Set 1. He has an ability of Counterblast 1, choose a face-down card from your G-Zone, turn it face up. One of the things I like about Mikazuki and Ishikiramaru is they don't require copies of themselves. So you can just kick out anything else, like your Seabreeze, the Hotaru Maru, whatever isn't relevant in that match. And he gets plus 3k for every face-up card in your G-Zone. On top of that, for every 2 face-up cards in your G-Zone, you can destroy 1 card in your opponent's front row per 2 cards up. So if I have like 4 cards face up in my G-Zone, I can destroy my opponent's entire front row off his activated ability. Beyond that, for every card face up in the G-Zone, he gets plus 3k, and as long as there's 2 or more, he gets a crit on top of it. So he just turns into a really fat crit monster that can often hit for like 51 crit 2 while playing a control row and destroying your opponent's front row. Lastly is the new boss stride, so to speak, Mikazuki Munichika Toku. This is the card I was talking about earlier that can set up your restanding lane so you can get multiple crit 2 attacks off. If you have a Kanasada Horikawa lane, you can use our starter's ability to make that 31k crit 2, attack with it, attack with your other lane, And if you're playing our grade 1 that can attack from the back row, you can use him to attack from the back row, so that's 3 attacks before your Vanguard swing. Then your Vanguard swings, you CB1 pitch 2, restand all of that, everything that just got restood gets plus 3k, so if they couldn't block your 31k crit 2 lane the first time, it's 37 crit 2 this time. Not to mention Mikazuki's crit 2 because everything's standing, and you've got 3 drive trigger checks on top of that. Next, we're going to go into our G-Guards. They're pretty simple. We have a Dizzy and a Gleam, just because I find them both useful in certain situations. Sometimes you've already burnt your Surumaru, you don't want to have to get a Kanasada again. You can just Dizzy, hey, Kanasada can't be hit. Now you don't have to worry about protecting them anymore. A Gleam helps you find things that you're looking for in the deck to set up your more powerful turns. It can find you, your draw trigger so you can countercharge one. It can find your whatever piece you're missing for the Kanasada Horikawa lane, or just a bunch of useful things. Jizumaru Sunetsugu is pretty self-explanatory. It's a very powerful G-Guard. It's really good against decks that restand, like Kagero and Nova Grappler and stuff. It's CB1, SB1. When it's placed on the Vanguard circle, choose one of your opponent's attacking units and it gets minus 10k until the end of turn, not the end of battle. So if your opponent's attacking with a restanding Vanguard, you can just nerf it down 10k, and now you've got, since you did it to a Vanguard, you can get plus 5. So you just created what was their 36 to your 11, being their 26 to your 31. So you've now made it a 1 to pass on their side for CB1, SB1. Lastly, we have Kusetsu Samanji Toku, who is just our generic good G-Guard as well. It's, if you have Shigenosatsu, Soul Blast 1, he gets plus 10k. So he's 25k shield for 1 Soul Blast.
Oh yeah, the Guardians are fucking stupid.
Yeah, like, the G-Guards are probably the thing I was most excited to get out of the new set. Outside of that, we've gone over the whole deck now. I mentioned briefly the Mikatoku setup with Seiyo Samanji and the Kanasada Horikawa lane. That's where you get your 31k attack from the rear guard, the Vanguard punch, the 31k column, your other column, your attack from the back row with our grade 1 that can attack from the back row, and then you attack with Mika, which is another crit 2 attack that restood all those, gave them plus 3k, and then another 37k crit 2 swing from the Kanasada lane. Outside of that,
any final comments?
Don't really have much else to say. I think the deck's been like super talked down on for a long time, and I'm gonna go play top 8 and see where I get with it.
All right, thank you.